Okay, guys, good afternoon. Thank you for waiting. We had some technical problems, but everything is solved now. So my name is Daniel, and I am the coordinator of GEELLE, Grupo de Estudos sobre Educação Linguística em Línguas Estrangeiras. And this is our 10th encounter this semester, this term. And I will start projecting here the introduction of our event. Let's see if it works. And let's see if it works. Okay, I'm always checking also the YouTube too. So yeah, let's go. So I'll do it very fast. So today we have the honor to welcome Professor DIMANDE from the University of Texas, San Antonio, and Professor SOUZANA MIZAN from the Federal University of São Paulo. And they will talk to us about images, visual literacies, and race in teacher education. Very intriguing and very interesting combination of topics, right? And of course, we also have Professor Andrea Kotling to help me moderate this let's say this big chat we're having with DIMANDE and SOUZANA. Okay, so this is very fast. This is our email. Please write down if you have questions, if you haven't got your certificate that we're sending to you after the event. And this is the National Project of Literacies. It's a 10-year project coordinated by Valkyria Linmario, myself, and Ana Paula Duboc. And we are, let's say, partners of Projeto Nacional de Letramentos. And these are all the events, as you know. We've had this one about teacher education. I'll go very fast because you have all registered. This one was about queer theory, education, and language education. This one was in English. You can find all the events on YouTube if you type GEELLE Daniel Ferraz. It's our channel. Okay. We also had this one about internationalization and teacher education. Okay. We also had this one about teacher education and the contributions of the Spanish. So Spanish scholars. All of them very interesting. So we invite you to join us and watch the YouTube videos. This one, the coloniality and language teacher education. Okay, so I'm just giving you the titles. And this one was about educating in pandemic times. Okay, and this one was about autoethnography and teacher education. Okay, and the last one was about literacies in times of pandemic. So we've had all of this so far. And the two texts that we read from DIMANDE and from SOUZANA MIZAN, we chose this one, very interesting text by Professor DIMANDE, School Choice and Inequalities in Post-Apartheid South Africa. Don't worry, because we will send the texts and the certificates and all the information from this live to your emails, okay? And this text written by SOUZANA MIZAN and me, Daniel Ferraz, Educating in Pandemic Times, in Times of Pandemic, Images as Micropolitics of Epistemic Disobedience to the Modern and Humanist Epistemologies of the Global North, okay? So as I said, don't worry, we will send you all these texts. And as we have done during this third cycle of events, the GEELLE Talks, 10 minutes for me to do this very brief introduction. And then we have DIMANDE and MIZAN, and then the questions from GEELLE, and then the YouTube chat. So I'd like to start with some ideas, some images and interpretations. So I'd like you to take like 3 seconds, or if you can interact with me in the chat, what you see in these images, okay? So I will show you some images, and let me tell you that before I ask the questions to Dimandi and MIZAN, I will return to these images and contextualize all these images. But for now, it's just an exercise of image interpretation. By the way, this is something that I do a lot when I'm teaching undergraduate and graduate students, okay? Free image interpretation, okay? So I give you like 3 to 5 seconds to interpret these images and write, what do you see in the chat, if you can help me? Let's see. So what do you see there? Okay, move on to the next image. This one, what do you see there? Okay, so I want to see you interacting with me along the, yeah, I see Tamara wrote poverty. This one, diversity. Okay, so I give you like some seconds for you, or just enjoy the image, okay? Pay attention to the details if you are not willing to interact in the chat, okay? The next one, what do you see? Adriano said, I see a lot of poor houses, reproductive work, okay? Luciana Fonseca, my colleague, and Luciana coordinates the GEELLE with me. Thank you, Luciana, for being there. Claudinha, favela, okay. And this one, what about this one? What do you see? Okay, and we have this one. So we have two images here. Here, still separate and unequal. You're violating my freedom. I can't breathe. And here, you're violating my freedom. I can't breathe. And this one here, what do you see here? I don't care about Miguel's death. So you can send me words like sad, sadness, or critique, or what do you see in these images, okay? By the way, these two images are in the article that I had the pleasure to co-write with Professor MIZAN. And this one, what do you see in this one? Ceci n'est pas une école. Yeah, it's nice because Michelle and Gabriela, they are projecting your answers. I see here from the chat, from the YouTube. I'm always following here and following YouTube to see if everything goes smoothly, goes okay. Okay, and this one was a meme. The translation is, children, the online class is about to start. Go to your corner, to your study corner, and switch on your laptops. This is like the enchanted, let's say, world of the neoliberals. Yeah, this is the solution to educate citizens, the neoliberal solution. So this is a meme that was spread a lot in social media. And all of these images and memes, they are in this article that I mentioned by MIZAN and Ferraz. Okay, very, very good. So as I said, Andrea Kotling is helping me moderate this debate today. And maybe I can invite Andrea to join me. Andrea, can you? Hello, Andrea. Good afternoon.
Hi, Dan. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dan, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, Professor Dimande, SOUZANA, MIZAN. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Would you like to say something about your work with images? I know you have a PhD in visual literacy and cinema.
Yeah, I think this conversation is special to me because I have been studying critical literacy, race and gender issues and violence, mainly the representation of the non-hegemonic other in the cinema, and focusing on the African Americans since the beginning of Hollywood and how they have been stereotyped. So I think it is going to be a great conversation.
Yes, yes, it's a brilliant PhD dissertation. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being with us. Guys, let's start. Come on, we are all here to welcome. So, Michele, I should welcome, and I should thank also always Michele Avelar and Gabriela Tomizuka. They're doing all the technical stuff for us. Thank you. And so let's invite SOUZANA MIZAN. Yes? So SOUZANA and NDIMANDE, they talked, and then they decided SOUZANA will start. And SOUZANA, thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure. It's always such an honor to have you at GEELLE with your contributions. You have been such a nice person to us. You always accept our invitations. Here at GEELLE, we don't make those formal presentations, introductions. You can talk about your projects, but people have to know that, at least for me, SOUZANA MIZAN and Andrea Kotling, of course, they are inspirations for me because they have carried out research in terms of critical literacy, teacher education, and visual literacies and images, and for a long time, and it's a work that I do admire. So thank you very much, Professor MIZAN, for being with us. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for inviting me again. It is always a pleasure to be with GEELLE and to be here with Jimanji and Andrea Kotling, whose work I admire, of both Jimanji and Andrea Kotling, and of course your work, my dear, which is always an inspiration to us. I'd like to start my talk today by saying that we are speaking from the context of 500,000 deaths in Brazil because of COVID and because of the biopolitics of the government. So I think this introduction needs to be done. And I would like now, if Michele could project my presentation. So I will start talking about topics that are very dear to me, images and visual literacies. And lately I have been researching race, especially in the language we use in teacher education. I don't know if it is possible, Dan, to show the whole image, to project the whole slide.
I'm asking Michele to do that. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I can now pass to the second slide. I cannot do it from here, Dan.
SOUZANA, you are projecting.
No, I am not the one who I am projecting. So yes, I need to go to my presentation.
Yeah, unfortunately, you.
Is this? Can you see my presentation?
Yes. Now try full screen, please.
In my computer, it is full screen.
Not in ours. Michele, something is going on. No, don't worry.
Can you see me passing the slides?
No. Yeah. Now, yes. Now it's teaching kids in America. Okay, now yes.
Can I apresentação de slides? Can I do it?
Yes.
And now?
1 second. No.
I think I'm going to.
Do you want to send to me, and then I can project from here?
I've sent you already done to your.
Have you? Yeah.
To your email.
So sorry guys, technical problems. Today's the day of the. So I will open from here, Michele, and I will project from here. Is that okay, me? Let me see. Sorry, SOUZANA. Yeah, but
no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you sent me the presentation this morning. Yeah. Susanna, very efficient. So you can continue talking, and I will.
Okay, I can. I will start. Then we pass the slides. So my talk today starts with a piece of news that appeared in one of the biggest newspapers, Folha de São Paulo, in Brazil, in the beginning of this week, and the main title was "Racial inequality is even worse in the richest regions in Brazil." So the newspaper has been publishing about the racial inequality issue all through this week with different kinds of news and approaches to the racial issue in Brazil. So usually when we talk about identities, we make this triangulation: one nation, one people, one language. These are the concepts with which I'm going to work today. And I am going to expand these concepts with the thinking of Montemor, that instead of saying one nation, she says one territory, one identity, and one language. And for the Portuguese thinker Grada Quilomba,
sorry to interrupt you. I am projecting already, okay? You can check your screen, okay?
Okay, I am looking at my screen, but I don't see my presentation yet. You have been silenced, Dan.
Sorry. You look, stay on the page of StreamYard.
And I will
project.
there.
You're there, and you see a lot of crazy things now, but I will project in a second.
Okay.
And then you just tell me next slide, okay?
Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's it. So while I am projecting, I will be showing you some images that create a visual narrative that is sometimes converges and other times distances itself from what I am verbally speaking about. So I said about this turning the screw that Montemor gave to the one nation, one language, one identity triangulation. And I am bringing the reference of Grada Quilomba here, who says that certain bodies are allowed to circulate in certain territories and have certain languages. And when she talks about that, she brings the experience she had of being checked in the University of the Library in Germany, where she was doing her PhD, because a black body is not a body which is commonly seen in the library territory in Germany. Next, please, Dan. So how can we think about race? My thinking brings the image that and the metaphor that the Portuguese sociologist Sousa Santos creates of the abyssal lines modern Western thinking has created. What does it mean, the abyssal lines? It means that modern Western thinking operates through abyssal lines that divide the human from the subhuman in such a way that human principles don't get compromised by inhuman practices. And we create this side of the abyssal line, which is the global north, that doesn't always have a correlation with the geographic north, but many times, yes, it does. And the global south. The global north would be the place of homogeneity, of normativity, of structure, of privilege, while the global south would be the place of heterogeneity, of variation, of difference, and of suffering. Next, please, Dan. Gabriella Veronelli talks about the historically marginalized and ignored body. And when she talks about those bodies are racialized bodies that are seen less than human beings, and thus without any complex form of communication, that is, without language. And here I selected some images. The first one on the left is the image of Ota Benga from Congo in the beginning of 20th century, who was brought from Congo to be exposed in a human zoo in North America. And the second image on the right, on the top, shows a Congolese child in a cage in the 50s. And below we have a very recent cartoon that was published after the killing of John Floyd, and another meme that shows a pregnant woman holding a bulletproof jacket for her unborn child and reminds us of a recent incident of the shooting and killing of a pregnant Black woman in the slums in Brazil. Yes, please. So how to think? Here are some more images that Dan already projected, because those are images we have been publishing about, thinking about racism. And to me, to think about race is to think about how the distribution of our sensitivities, the distribution of the sensible, in the words of French philosopher Jacques Rancière, and the very good work Andrea Kotling has done with the representation of the Black body in Hollywood, inspired in the theory by Rancière of the distribution of the sensible. And what does it mean, the distribution of the sensible? It means that there are structures of feeling that have been established and that they produce the space and the public realm, the public space, and in turn, those structures of feeling are sanctioned, reproduced, and maintained. Yes, Dan, please, the next one. So bodies meet in contact zones, according to Mary Louise Pratt. And what are contact zones? Contact zones are social places and spaces where cultures meet, but in asymmetrical relations of power, such as colonialism, slavery, or the coloniality we have been living nowadays in the global south and also in the global north. Yes, Dan, please, the next one. So one of the ways that helped me think about the racialized body, in fact, is how it behaves in the contact zones. And I use the concept of strategic essentialism by Indian thinker Gayatri Spivak to understand the political tactic minoritized groups use to essentialize themselves. They get dressed with the feathers, with bow and arrows, in order to ask for their rights. And this way they create a group identity. The image on the top, I have published about some time ago, I think it was in 2014, but the one below of the indigenous environmental activist Haoni, I took from the internet 3 days ago during the protests by the indigenous people for the new bill that seeks the non-demarcation of indigenous lands in Brazil. Next, please, Dan. I also think together with João Paulo Xavier, who talks about aesthetic racism. And aesthetic racism raised my interest during the 2016 Kinky Hair Parade in Curitiba. That the report done in the newspaper was followed by racist comments by that were published by the users, the readers of the newspaper. So we see that the aesthetic works in a disciplining way, in a way of a police way of checking what kind of aesthetics can be permitted in certain territories. And these aesthetics set the social order, but this social order operates in the side of the bodily perception because it is our structure of feeling, right? So to me, Rancière, in spite of being a French philosopher that writes from the global north, he thinks with the concepts that we use in the decolonial theories that are produced here in the global south. First of all, because he brings the concept of the aesthetic and he brings the body back with its emotions and feelings. So Rancière privileges the senses in fixing matrices of truth through which the political is understood, because the aesthetic is also the political. Next one, please, Dan. If I talk too much, you just stop me, okay? Maybe I prepared too long a presentation, Dan. So we see, according to Angela Davis, the incarceration of the Black body, bodies that are considered killable and disposable, such as the case of Miguel in Brazil in the beginning of the pandemic. Next one, please. So, but I would like to think about race from the language perspective, because we are teachers of language. And I bring here the term linguistic racism coined by Gabriel Nascimento, whose theories and writings have inspired me a lot. And I see this linguistic racism in an online course I taught during the 2013 in the public schools in the state of São Paulo. I was a tutor, and you can see that when you say things like having my nails done, which body is having her nails done and who is doing the nails? What kind of activities are attributed to Black identities in the course? And I push for linguistic citizenship in the words of Christopher Stroud, who says that we need an approach to agency and voice designed to draw attention to the power of the unheard and unattended voice, and one that opens to other discourses of the human. Next one, please, Dan. So, how to think about race? I think one of the things we need to do is what Menezes de Souza recommends. We need learn to unlearn, right? And maybe relearn, as Getolin and Fernandez say in a recent article they wrote. And moreover, I go along with what Monchimor suggests, that we need to interrupt the interpretive habitus, the way we have been taught to think, break with the commonsensical way of thinking, in other words. Yes, Dan? And what does it, so still, what does race, images, visual literacy have to do with language? The fact that Audre Lorde tells us the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And for me, those tools are language tools, right? So we needed to give my student whose identity has changed because of quotas here in Brazil, the tools to use language for his own interests. And I bring here a poetry by Kipling that says, "Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed, go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flattered folk and wild, your new-caught sullen people, half devil and half child." So the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Yes, Dan? So we have been noticing that there has been epistemic violence, and epistemic violence persists in our universities and in our schools. And we need to think together with Jimanji, whose knowledge is included or excluded from our classrooms. Yeah. So again, I go back to what Menezes de Souza and Nascimento suggest, that we need to mark the unmarked. It means to mark the default, what has become invisible to us, okay? And never forget that the I is the other of the other. It means that the white body is someone's other as well, right? So we have this emergence of man, the white, rational, disembodied male as human. And this is very problematic, because liberal rights frameworks such as human rights, freedom of speech, require a certain type of subject, one that is disembodied and abstract and universal, like the Vitruvian man. The next one. And we need to bring back the body stolen by coloniality. And this body is the racialized, sexualized, genderized, and godless bodies. The colonized other, that is the Black, female, languageless, and hidden subject against the human colonizer, the disembodied yet white male master. Yes, Dan? So, this distribution of the sensible, that it means that our sensitivities, our emotions don't emerge in relation to certain bodies suffering, right? So those sensibilities we have, and they are structured by the discourses and the webs of significance of the society, determine what is visible and invisible, sayable and unsayable, audible and inaudible, defining the parameters of what can be thought or reflected upon. I don't know how I'm doing with time, Dan. I will go quickly. Go ahead, please. What are the purposes of education? Education is seen as assimilation to the status quo. Education, as in the neoliberal education, is a factory of future workers. Or we need to think of education for qualified citizenship, as Biesta recommends. To do that, in my opinion, we need to go along with what Deleuze and Guattari recommend. We need a decentering of language onto other dimensions and registers. But we have a common core curricular base, and this is our mainstream curriculum and the canon talks about universal truths, but we need to contest the danger of the single story in our educational curriculum. And we need to admit that somehow we act with strategic complicity in neoliberal education. Somehow the curriculum, in my opinion, perpetuates webs of significance that seek to maintain the power of dominant social and racial groups. We need to think about the regimes of truth that construct our way of thinking. We need to study the structure and content of our history books, of our books in general, in my opinion. And what we need is a displacement from aesthetics to politics. To me, racial education is a social responsibility, as Aparecida de Jesus Ferreira she proposes that racial education is not just the responsibility of the racial body educator, it's the responsibility of all of us, okay? Aparecida de Jesus Ferreira is, to me, the founding mother of critical race theory in Brazil. So the decolonial thinking, I insert all the theories I'm talking about today in a decolonial way of thinking that seeks a redistribution of the sensible. We have the ethical need for understanding difference, and at the same time, the ethical recognition that I cannot understand the difference. We need to read the word of minoritized groups and read their world and their sense of community, as Bell Hook tells us in her effort to construct loving communities. Yes, Danielle? In order to do that, I think there is another movement we have to do towards the locus of enunciation. The imperative that we have to engage with differently historically constructed others that bring other loci of enunciation. This way, we might broaden our epistemic access, decolonize curricula, and transform institutions. When we bring into account the space from which we speak, then we bring into account something which has been eliminated in academic discourse, which is the body. To speak from a space means you are speaking from a body located in space and time. And I am inspired in the thinking of Gabriella Veronelli and the relation she weaves between race, power, and language, and the way she tries to situate reason in specific time and space. She supports in education the perspectives and life experiences of peoples from the global south, that these are the narratives that need to emerge in our classroom. And accepting and positioning the subaltern, the minoritized, as an epistemic force with possibilities of generating knowledge. This programmatic direction is not a counter-hegemonic global design, because language in this context is always seen locally, and the needs for education are always local, situated needs. And it doesn't deny the contributions Western civilization has had in the human history, but at the same time seeks to open up the option for other logics of thinking that emanate from other subjects. Yes, Dan, the next one, please. So we are rooting for and we are pushing for micropolitics of epistemic disobedience, according to the Argentinian thinker Mignolo. And we believe that this can be done through a critical intercultural education of teachers of global languages. The intercultural perspective recognizes the existence of other knowledge systems capable of articulating new knowledge configurations as an alternative to modern science. And we bring here the epistemology of the ecology of knowledges, which recognizes as equal different kinds of knowledges that emanate from different bodies. So who is afraid of racial education? Here, the governor, I think it is, he's the governor of Texas. They voted against the teaching of critical race theory at schools because they believe that teaching kids about race is teaching kids to hate America. This is something we should think about. That's it, done. I hope I didn't take too much of the time.
I couldn't communicate with you because I was showing the slide. That's really okay. A little bit more of time, but it was a class, so a very nice class you always give us. I will invite.
Sorry, Dan.
No, don't worry. I will invite Andrea Kotling to join me. I don't know if she has any comments. We have a lot of. Oh, Andrea, just a sec. We have a lot of we have a lot of comments from the chat. But while Dimandi is preparing himself to talk to us, Susana, something that calls my attention from your presentation and from many others that I see, and by following your work, is, I mean, the consistency in working, in dealing with the images, and bringing this visual literacy that is connected to philosophy, to the philosophy of language, cultural studies, anthropology, sociology, language education, and anti-racist critical literacies. So I see all of this in the combination of your talk, your theories, and the images that are very well chosen and carefully. And I'd like to thank you for that. And why am I saying this, Susana? Because I think that working with images might provide and might bring and open a lot of windows, as knowledge windows, epistemological windows, as you have just shown us in 20 minutes of your talk. And at the same time, I think we were talking about this in our group, a GEELLE group, that images, they play such a minor role in education, in language education, and in teacher education courses in Brazil. This is what I think. This is the impression that I have. And when we talk about images, we just talk about the representation side of it. This image represents, or let me just do something. This image represents or complements the written text. And we know as researchers on image studies and visual literacy, that is not the case. We have a lot to explore, including the manipulation through visual, so through visual inputs or images. So thank you very much for your talk. A lot of things to think about, and thank God it's recorded because we can watch it again. Andrea.
Susana, it's very intriguing. Your presentation is fantastic. And I just love the necessity of redistributing the sensible so that we can, towards a critical education. So I think it is extremely important. In other words, you use the concept of epistemological disobedience. which fosters a more critical education. And we can do this by means of visual literacy. So it's quite intriguing, this work of providing images during our classes. So
thank you.
thank you very much
Totally
for
agree
this
with
class.
you guys. And I think that Andrea Kotling's work shows exactly this, that we can practice epistemological disobedience through our speaking about images, right?
Okay. Thank you, guys. So I will invite Demande. So I think Michele is bringing, yeah, thank you. Let me just say thank you to, I saw Joel Window and Gabriel Nascimento. They are here with us. And they were, I think, I'm almost sure I skipped, but I'm going to fix that, Joe and Gabriel. But last event, Demande, was about anti-racist language education and anti-racist teacher education. So we are kind of connecting both conversations, okay? So let's start then, Michele, with Demande. So Demande, thank you very much for being with us. And I'd like to say thank you to Joel and to Miriam Jorge again, because I had the pleasure and the honor to recently get to know your work. And our students from the GEELLE group, they loved reading the text. I can give you that feedback. We had a lot of discussions, like they creating the images of the townships as they were reading, all the narratives that you brought. So thank you very much. We don't make any formal presentations, those academic ones, to give you opportunity to talk about yourself and your work. And thank you very much for being with us. Demande.
Okay. I say boa noite, boa noite. I made a very big mistake today to let Professor MIZAN speak before me, because she has just such a wonderful professor who said all this, great presentation, strong theoretical frameworks. So it's my fault to let her speak before me. I should have had speak after me, but people are not going to listen to me anymore because they've already heard that great presentation in there. But Professor Ferraz, thank you so much. Professor MIZAN, thank you so much. And the colleagues who are in here are professors from different parts of Brazil. And again, I want to say to my friend, Professor Joel Window, without him, I probably wouldn't have known you, or I wouldn't be here. So, but all of you really, Professor Ferraz, for inviting me. Appreciate that so much. I have this affinity for Brazil, having been to Brazil and having been to, 2 different universities, actually 3. So I think of the Brazilian people as South African people, given the struggles that we all went through, the struggles in Brazil of the dictatorship, and now with Bolsonaro going on, and here in the US, things still going on in terms of the voters' rights. Those are part of the images. But I wanted to start with just my commentary. Professor MIZAN mentioned critical race theory. This is a really intriguing thing. Well, actually, it's a sad thing, not even intriguing. It's sad in that people like us, we've been teaching anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-oppression theories for many years, ever since I started teaching, But just that we didn't call it critical race theory. People did not, people just resisted. But as soon as they hear the word that says race, critical race theory emerging from the law discourse, so the field of law, then because there were prominent people who used the actual word, then it has to be banned. So, and Professor MIZAN, you're right. it's a really contested terrain at different parts of the United States in terms of that word, and even on television we see that. But what I'm energized by the undergraduate students, the graduate students that I teach, who believe that we have to know the truth. One of them wrote to me that it will be so bad if our children, and quote unquote use the word our children, all of us, these are our children, if they did not know the truth. So there's no title. I know that Joel Windle has seen by. There's no title that says critical race theory in my syllabus, but I teach about equity. I teach about if school choice has created the binaries of those who have and those who have not. If school choice has created binaries of race, better schools being white and poor school being black, that is critical race theory, right? So I don't know how far they're gonna keep banning all the courses. I mean, you may or may not remember that even Paulo Freire, maybe like 5-6 years ago, in the state of Arizona, the state came out and say they're gonna ban the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And at that time, it's so interesting, I was a professor at the University of Illinois, and I was teaching a graduate class using one of the textbooks was actually Pedagogy of the Oppressed. But then people really fought on that, and eventually that book is still being used. But Pedagogy of the Oppressed has its own history, where at one point it was banned in Brazil. You correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I know for sure that it was banned in South Africa in the 1980s because the People's Education Movement used that book to energize itself, to energize the movement, using Paulo Freire's work, and the government banned the book. So it came back after 1994. So really to talk about images, images for me, and I come from the field of curriculum and teacher education, I'm not as nuanced and as an expert in studying the actual images as Professor MIZAN is, and Professor Ferraz is, Professor Joel Windle is, and others in this room. You are more knowledgeable. This is your field. I put this as a nexus between curriculum and the images, and I look at them as images are not neutral, just as curriculum is not neutral. So I look at images, and I look at them here in the United States, back at home. I know that I've done some work that we presented at the Paulo Freire conference with Professor Joel Windle, looking at the images of the World Cup in South Africa and the images of World Cup here in Brazil. I'm not in Brazil, but in Brazil, I think that was 2014, and in South Africa was 2010. So there's a really stark contrast in there to see how even during the time of a big event like this, which is strictly neoliberal, and not disrespect to soccer-loving communities, but the impact of those events on the social welfare, on poor people, how you take what has been marginalized and make it prominent just for the sake of advertising. So images truly, as Professor MIZAN said, they cut across race, they cut across issues of sex, they cut across issues of sexuality, they cut across issues of cultural divide, they cut across issues of nationality. If you to look at the borders right now in the United States, you look at the border coming from Canada and the border coming from Mexico, the images that are being that are being shown about those different borders, they clearly show that one is the one that is good and the one is the one that is not good. So, and this is just a commentary. I thought it was just going to be a panelist, but I didn't know that I needed to produce a paper. But this is just a commentary to come back and say that for us to understand how images project, we need to also know what colonialism has done in all the countries that have been colonized. And I thought that was clearly discussed by Professor MIZAN on that, using the work of Spivak and, you know, that work of what colonialism has done, drawing from the work in Portugal and the SOUZANA that you used. So colonialism has created that binary between what is good image and what is bad image. When I grew up in South Africa under apartheid, all the images that were on the billboards, images that were on television when I grew up, were images of white male. And I'm not talking about women in here. It was mostly about white male. And if it wasn't about white male, those images were about law enforcement, how we're gonna control you, and we want to show you what it means, how we deal with thugs, right? So you'll see how police really would put you to jail if you don't obey. So those were the images. When I got to see the image of Nelson Mandela, when I had already graduated from high school, and I just remember even the year when it came out, because it sold all newspapers, because his images, all his images, being a boxer, you know, doing all kinds of work, giving speeches, you know, all those images were controlled. And the first time I got just to see his picture was in 1989. Then, but obviously people who were older generation knew how he looked like, but I did not, so I got to see those. Recently, I watched a documentary called Pelé on Netflix. And I was just so conflicted to see how the dictatorship in Brazil at that time used Pelé as a way of galvanizing the people to support what the government was doing. And my honest take on that, and you could criticize me later or even now, I wish Pelé could have spoken up and say that what the dictatorship was doing was not right in terms of suppressing the people. So I'm looking here, colonialism, apartheid, dictatorship, and look at those images, what they have done and projected. So this is something really painful, because I don't talk about it so lightly, because right now in Brazil, Joel has sent me pictures of some of friends that I know in Brazil who were in hospital because of Bolsonaro's policies, because of how people are being purged. But that projection is an image of repression, so to speak. So think about the times now in COVID. So many people have passed away, and I want to pay respect to the people who lost their loved ones. I heard this week that Brazil now is second after United States. I know in the United States we have 500,000 people who died here because of the COVID, and President Trump, the former President Trump, simply denying that this was the pandemic, and what's going on now with the current president there, Bolsonaro. But one thing the question that I always ask myself about this image of COVID-19, what if COVID-19 was a disease that was just attacking, not indiscriminately, but now it's just indiscriminate, right? But was attacking people of certain race, people of certain gender. So there was going to be, again, that creation. Oh, those who have COVID-19, those who cannot do that. Although that still happens, because if you cannot have good healthcare insurance and have access to medication, those divides, that divide still stands there. It's a sad situation, but which we need to talk about it carefully, because we have lost so many people, and I want to say condolences to those who lost their loved ones. In South Africa is the same. South Africa has lost, so many people, and then prominent people who could have taken themselves to the ER if they could, but because it's the disease. I'm just thankful that now there isn't, like when HIV/AIDS spiked in South Africa, it were township communities that were saying, oh, those who have HIV, don't go there, right? Don't go there, they have HIV. Don't go there, they're poor. So the COVID comes with that too, in a way that the fact that the global South, and I know that in Brazil right now, I don't speak like at the first hand, but I can speak about South Africa, that to get those vaccination, it's really, really hard. Even with the patents now going on, that, okay, we're gonna patent this, but vaccination really, the real people who pay for vaccinations are the taxpayers people. And on the last, when the vaccine is about to be done, then you get the big conglomerate companies like Pfizer, Moderna. They put in the last screw of the whole thing, which is paid by the taxpayer. And they say, well, now it's patented, now it's ours. So that's another image of division. I'm going to end with schools. I know there are a lot of teachers in here. In South Africa, access to internet is racialized. And I see Professor Ferraz showed just in the beginning of this, showed a little picture where somebody tells the kids, and the kids, I may be wrong, but it looks like they're in the favelas. I may be wrong, telling them, go to your corner and log on onto Zoom, log on to internet. But you cannot tell kids that who live in those conditions and say, open up your computer right now. So Jonathan Johnson, one of my respected scholars in South Africa, wrote up a very, very interesting article saying, Black kids, they have to choose between buying bread or buying internet. What do you choose between buying bread or buy internet? And in fact, I pay less for internet in the United States than my family in South Africa, because they make it even more expensive there. And I really end as most professors say, they're going to end, but we don't end. My student says, oh, we know, professor, when you say it's your last point, it is actually your first point. But this is my last point right now. When I grew up, in a, I don't mind to tell my age, but I'm the after 1976 generation. The generation in 1976 helped us to fight the regime. Hector Peterson's picture, the image, people, if you could Google Hector Peterson, you see the image of that child who was shot from the back. So they created the way for us. And that image, and I'm going to talk about that if I stay longer to get to the questions, is in terms of how images could also be liberating in terms of informing the outside world. So talking about this generation, I'm a generation that Mama Mandela used to say, we were called the lost generation. So the question was posed when I was in school, in a I would never pre-K, but K through 12 school, was posed and say, you are so radical. How about you go to school and then you finish school, then fight for freedom? So we became what was known the lost generation. And the question posed, do you want freedom now and education later? Or you want education now and freedom later? So we're expected to choose. But most of my generation, including myself, and I was no leader, I was not known moving forward. I guess if I was a leader, I would have been killed. So I'm standing on the shoulders of those who were in front of, I was part of following from behind. And I won't give an answer how we chose. I'll just leave it there. And people might think, I want you to think what we chose. Thank you.
Wow. What a question, Dimandi. Thank you so much. I'll bring Andrea here. And as you were talking, let me just clarify something, Dimandi. This is more like of course it is an academic event, let's say between quotation marks, but the speakers are very free to talk about their lives, their projects, or their images from their experiences, or project a PowerPoint. There is no rule, okay? But I'd like to thank you, of course.
But I still say I made a mistake by having Professor MIZAN
before. No, come on. Okay. But yeah. But I think the images, as you were talking to us about the narratives, the many narratives, what makes me think, the connections that I can make is like how the impact of these images in our lives, they stay in our memories. They make us laugh, they make us cry, they make us feel different emotions. And as I've been saying, they educate, they manipulate, they do a lot of things. And I think this event is very important because, as both of you have shown, they are present everywhere. And I don't know why, and I will insist on that, they are such a minor part of teacher education course or language education courses. But this is my question for you in a while. Andrea, would you like to say something about Dimandi's presentation? Your microphone, yeah.
Okay then, do you hear me? Thank you, Professor Dimandi. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I was thinking about your text of township schools. and the way you shed light on the hidden discourse of neoliberalism that says that parents are allowed to choose schools, but in fact, actually, they are not, because there are no resources, and how we can deconstruct, we have to deconstruct official discourse, and I think it is. It is valuable. Your presentation is valuable because it makes us think about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we can bring MIZAN. Okay, the four of us. And now we have some questions from GEELLE, but I think we have time for one or two. Let's see how it goes. I will project the first question to MIZAN and NDIMANDE. Let me see if everything goes right. Michelle, please help me. Let me see. Share. Okay. Share screen. So the first question I have for you, let's see here. Yeah. So as I told you, of course, I took these images from the internet, but these are the townships. I really don't recognize which one it is, but maybe NDIMANDE can help us. From South Africa. This is from Brazil. This is a favela or a slum. This is Heliópolis in São Paulo, okay? This one is another one from a township in South Africa. And this is another one from a favela, from a slum in Brazil. And so the first question I have for you is, how do you see the connections between images and contemporary society? I think NDIMANDE and MIZAN, they have touched this, but if you have something else to complement. And also this very important question, also between images and education, images and teacher education. Okay, so this is the first question for you guys.
You can go first, NDIMANDE. I think he froze then.
Yeah.
Shall I go first?
Yes, please. Yeah,
okay.
Let's wait for him.
So I really appreciate NDIMANDE's talk because NDIMANDE brought different kinds of images in his speech, especially about the image of Nelson Mandela being freed, the image of Pelé's practices during dictatorship here in Brazil. So I think it was a very insightful speech.
I may have put my video off for a while.
Are you okay, NDIMANDE? Just a second.
Would you like? Do you think NDIMANDE wants to go first on the question?
Stop sharing my video because it looks like my internet is not doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
NDIMANDE, would you like to answer the question first?
So video. I know that the best answer I cannot give. Okay, I'm just kidding. That's the joke. Well, I just want to clarify something real quick. Is a difference between the township in which I grew up, as well as something called the informal settlement, but they're all on the periphery. So it's just that it's just the hierarchy of the original township. There were actual houses built. Some townships don't have a toilet, they don't have a bathroom. The toilet is all the way outside, but at least they were built and pretty close to each other. And then with the informal settlement, it's when people who were I would say use the word that were in diaspora, so to speak, not to scare people, say, well, the people who disappeared. No, they did not disappear, but they were put on the periphery. Now coming back, because they have the right to come back and reclaim their land. So nobody was taking care of them. In fact, we're not even giving that land. But it's a statement to say, this is our land. We're done being thrown on the ferry. We're coming back here. So that's the difference in that. And both of them, they're really a powerful thing. So the image is really, for me, will simply just say a simple story about race. Who lives in the township? That's a simple story about race. A simple story about the socioeconomic status. Who has money and who doesn't, right? Simple story about gender. Who actually work and make those settlements to live day by day? Those are women. Men are not doing that because men are out there trying to get some money. So it's just a simple story about these oppressive categories.
Susana?
So, in relation to the question about images in contemporary culture, I think together with other thinkers such as Mirzoev, Ferraz, that we are living a visual turn, especially because of the digital that intensifies the use of the image. We have memes, we have people's stories on Instagram, small videos, whatever. However, visual literacy has hardly penetrated our language classes because of logocentrism and graphocentrism. So still, many of my students don't understand why I bring images to my classroom. Traditionally, I have worked with images by studying the representations made by imported English language books that we used to teach with here in Brazil. So we would talk about Black identities in the book, about how women are represented, and but later on, I started speaking about images by bringing imagetic writings, such as the Kashinawa writings in Acre, following the studies made by Menezes de Souza, whom I cited in my presentation. In those imagetic writings are somehow a representation of the dreaming, of an oniric dimension in the lives of people, something that we Western people have difficulty understanding. Now, the last few years, we have been developing some work together with Daniel Ferraz in relation to images. And in our writings, we are reflecting on philosophical approaches and sociological approaches to images. We think about linguistic concepts such as structure and play, events, semiotic events, through images. So more or less, this is the work I have developed with images inside my classroom.
Great. Yes. Okay. So I think my questions 2 and 3, they have a lot to do with the questions in the chat. So I think we can start also because of time. But before I move on to the next 2 questions, Michelle, let me just say something. It's still going back to demands because I took the notes, but I just forgot. When both of you talked a lot about the dictatorship period and these very strong images, and there is the work of Andrea Machado de Almeida Matos. I'm putting here in the chat from UFMG, and she has worked with the post-memory theories in our field, and that's very, very interesting as well. And also, I'd like
Can I say something about
Yes,
that?
of course.
I think it was this week I read the paper by Piscino and Matos on the Adivasis narratives that were published in a blog called Who Am I? And the paper beautifully talks about questions of trauma, memory, and post-memory, inspired in the theory by Hirsch, who talks about in the Second World War, the extermination of the Jewish people. So I really recommend this approach to narratives and the reconstitution of memory, and how we can fight trauma in memory by constructing post-memory. Very good that you brought it up.
And also this memory and post-memory, highly visual memories, right, as well, not only emotional. And also, I'd like to share with you guys in the chat this the last issue of Revista Brasileira de Linguística Aplicada. I should have done it before in Gabriel Nascimento's, Joe, and Aparecida's event, but also because it talks a lot about everything that we've been talking about in this event and in the previous events. Now, Michelle, let's go to the questions for the.
May I add to what Susana said?
Yes, of course, dear.
Yeah, because she talks about testimony, and it according to Rancier's theory, it also, the testimony of something which was of an extremely pain, also redistributes the sensible. It is extremely important to talk about post-memory.
Great. So we're moving on to the questions from the audience. Otherwise, they kill us, Dimandi. You didn't ask my question. So I will join Ana Carla Barros Sobreira's question right from the beginning when Susana was presenting. And the previous one, Michelle, can you do the previous? You said, the other one, you said... Can you find Michelle? Because there's a question. She said, Susana, you said human and subhuman. Could we add no human? And then the question goes on. This is for Susana, for MIZAN, and for Dimandi. It's interesting because I'm developing right now a research about the images expressed in the Andean fabrics made by women. On the communities that I work, they are all oral people. In your opinion, how could we make the visible in terms of these abyssal lines you've talked about? So about this experience of the Andean women. And the one from Gabriel Nascimento. Let me try to find, it's here. I'd like to endorse such a point. Black people are sometimes those considered non-human. Can we urge subhuman instead of non-human regarding enslavement? Is that humanism ruling all that exists? So these two questions talking about all these ideas of human, humanity, subhuman, non-human. Can you tell us a little bit about your ideas? Thank you. Who wishes to start?
I don't know. Jumanji, would you like me to start?
You actually express the human and subhuman. You want to talk more about that, maybe?
That's right. That's right. Especially the one with Otabenga, right?
Yeah.
I would like to think on this topic together with Edward Said, the Palestine thinker, who talks about modern humanism. And modern humanism includes certain humans in the human club. Certain humans are admitted in the human club. So who is included, whose narratives and whose accounts of life are included in our classrooms and whose are excluded. I think those questions should be brought up. And I like to think together also with Gabriella Veronelli, who talks about inferior humans and animal-like beings. And these are the beings that have been situated at the other side of the abyssal line, which is the locus of suffering. So more or less, this is how I think about modern humanism.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just have a short version of looking at it. In my thinking and my work, it's, you know, when you have individuals that have been humanized, I'm going back to Paulo Freire, how do you humanize that? So in my own work, I use the concept of decolonizing research, where I work with marginalized parents, Black parents, to be specific, who I want to make their identities visible, because people who are colonized usually are not visible. They are not at the table. So I use that decolonizing methodology to bring their voices in. It was I was very excited to hear you all talking here at this panel, talking about memories, because right now I'm actually working on a book proposal on that. My entire thesis was on narratives, because for many years, Black parents in the township, they didn't have a voice for many years. So, but how do you bring that voice? So in a decolonizing and humanizing them, and then the visibility. So that's how I think about it. And I can tell you something that you have not asked, but I think it's something good to tell. I found it so hard to publish my work, especially in South Africa, because most of the journals that I sent my work to, they'll come back and say, but who did you interview? And I said, well, I interview parents. They said, but Black parents don't know anything about education. So it just always kills my heart. And one of the publications I have at Race, Ethnicity and Education with David Gilborn in the UK, that's where I really express my anger. And even my conclusion was just in one line. If you could go and pull up that article, maybe not maybe one line, maybe I'm exaggerating, right? But maybe like 3 lines to say that Black parents, they are very, I use the word nuanced. And you cannot say that if the data that was generated, not gathered, but generated with together, it doesn't make sense, because that is actually dehumanizing, and you say that they don't know anything. So I'm sorry I shared something personal, but Dr. Ferraz, you said we could share something personal. So.
Can I say something in relation
course,
to that I have learned with Menezes de Souza, that I think there should be a difference between education and schooling. Education, every parent gives. It's immanent to the way we bring up our children. Now, schooling is a whole different business. Schooling is about homogenizing kids. It is about teaching what is normative, what is the standard, while somehow practicing epistemic violence on the knowledges that kids, knowledges and languages and cultures that the kids bring from home. This has been a question that has occupied my thinking for quite some time. What does education mean and what does schooling mean? They mean different things, and everybody gives an education and educates his or her kids.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I have a quick question for you, Professor. So I'm aware of those distinctions. I just want to hear your opinion. It seems as if there is a role of schooling. Do you see a role of schooling for you?
So I have conflicting opinions on schooling. On the one hand, in Brazil, the Ministry of Education has been pushing for homeschooling in a society of deep social injustices, where people don't have neither the hardware, nor the software, nor the connection to the internet. So in a society like the Brazilian society, kids go to school to have lunch. Kids go to school as a better environment for living some hours. So pushing for homeschooling in such societies, it's just going to deepen the social injustices.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other hand, but I also want to point out the socialization practices in schooling. I find that bodies need to meet. Okay. Now, schooling, modern schooling, Jumanji, in societies like Brazil, in my opinion, have conducted epistemic violence, because they are promoting a kind of language that kids don't have, while they are oppressing the languages they bring from home. So there are students that will tell you, do you want me to learn English? I don't know how to speak Portuguese. Why does a kid think that he or she doesn't know how to speak his or her mother tongue? I think this comes from schooling. So if schooling provides you with language, I will go back to the orientations for high school education, and I will reiterate the need for teaching language and giving language tools to the kids, to the children, that will let them recognize the locus, the social locus they occupy in the society. Mm-hmm. And from understanding this locus, while we are providing them also with the privileged versions of language that will not act as gatekeepers in their societies, I think this kind of schooling should be promoted. This kind of education should be promoted. The one that doesn't practice epistemic violence, while it provides the students with the linguistic tools to fight to make it into the society, right? Mm-hmm. So more or less, this is how I see it, Jumanji.
Oh, we have time for one last question. And Cotrim, Andrea, yes?
Let me just add something. Susana, that's why we are expected to be disobedient. Yep.
Exactly. I mean, we shouldn't teach to assimilate in a perverse society. We should teach to resist, right? This is how I see it.
Okay. Mariana Dantas asks Professor Dimande, how do you see education in South Africa nowadays in terms of promoting a critical reading of the country's colonial past? She also asks you, are discussions being promoted in order to students know the colonial and apartheid periods?
Ooh. I knew that at some point a difficult question was gonna come. But you try to dodge questions and finally they come. Okay. Thanks for that question. I didn't get your name, sorry. The person who asked it, but
Mariana. Mariana.
Oh, thanks, Mariana. Thank you so much. We are still in the middle of what I usually call the partial victories, where I don't want to discount what has been done, where we're in the process of trying to desegregate schools, and the curriculum is not there yet. Now there's a movement that was called the decolonizing, I think it's called the decolonize the curriculum movement. But in itself, it's a little colonized in that whatever it is going to do was mostly saying, learning from the West, there's nothing wrong about learning from the West. There's nothing wrong about that. But you have to bring in those ideas and then localize them and say, well, how does this then can translate within our own situation? So, but it's really hard. Mariana, you asked me about this. It's really hard to have critical literacy, a true, engaging, radical, in a Freirean sense, radical critical literacy, when you have a neoliberal policies going on. So because the main discourse that circulates is a discourse of having money, discourse of having this. So the movement, the anti-apartheid movement, that has fractured in many ways. So now there's more like with neoliberalism promoting this competition. I want my child to go to that school because they can go to a better place. So it's no longer like when we're asked to choose, do you choose education now or liberation later? It's no longer like that. It's now I want to do that. But having said that, we are making some progress. We're making some progress in many ways, where we have different writers now who want to, who are pushing for children to learn in their indigenous languages. We're having schools that intentionally want students to know about the colonial history. So although not all schools are doing that, and again, there aren't resources in a neoliberal government that does that. You get to have to contend with the little resources that you have. I always dread this question. I hope I try to answer it because I never get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are still thinking about your question. Do you want freedom first and then education, or education and freedom first? Because this is totally Paulo Freire as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I will get here, Dimande, Suzana, and Cotrim, a comment, the last comment from Flavia Vital. Flavia, so nice to have you with us. I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned the many colleagues that are here with us, and also Dimande, Suzana. People watch it later on, like during the weekend, and send us emails, so the conversation keeps going. But Flávia Vital, she wrote in Portuguese, ainda bem, e ainda tem quem fique a vida toda ensinando verb to be. So translation, and there's still language teachers is still teaching the verb to be. and she's being ironic by saying that we in the language fields in Brazil, we are doing much more than just we teach language, but the way we've been teaching language is very different from decades ago because, of course, we've been using all the philosophical, sociological, and etc. knowledges that we have around us in order to really resignify what it means to teach a language. This is why we've been calling it language education. So time is over, unfortunately, but I'd like to ask you, I don't know if you have any final comments to share with our participants right now and the future participants that will watch this video, which we thank everybody here now and the future. I don't know if you'd like to say something, Andrea, SOUZANA, and NDIMANDE.
Yeah, I would love to, if you let me, real quick. And real quick, I just think that to be in this community of scholarship, for me, it really, it helps me to be learning. I'm not here to come in and present, but you'll know that I listen more. But having been in a community of Brazil, I so much want to thank my colleague, Professor Álvaro Hipólito, who is at the Universidade Federal de Pelotas, who was the first colleague to bring me to Brazil. Also, Professor Perez, Eliana Perez, who really pushed me to publish in Brazil. And I was crying. He'll just call me and say, "NDIMANDE, I need that paper done. I need that paper done." And when I saw that paper that people read it today, I was like, okay, I got to tell Eliana Perez and her husband as well. His name is Sebastião Perez. They are all in Universidade Federal de Pelotas, and then they introduced me to Joel as well. And now I know Dr. Ferraz and Dr. MIZAN and others. There's another professor in Missouri, I forgot her name. So
Miriam Jorge.
Right, Miriam Jorge. So for me, it's an honor just to be working in this community, to contribute in this community. So, and all the students who come in here, the colleagues I don't know who come in here. So all the people who are in the space, I pay homage and I feel privileged that I'm part of all of you. Thank you.
We should thank you because you're always very open to us. You're always very nice, very gentle, very kind to bring your ideas and your experiences. We thank you, NDIMANDE.
I do that because when the COVID is done, I know I'm gonna get some churrasco when I come home.
Definitely, yes, definitely.
I would also like to thank Dan for this wonderful event, for the chance to dialogue with Jimanji, with Cotrim, with you, with your viewers, your study group. It's always a pleasure to talk about things that are very dear to us. I think race should, and we don't need to say race. I mean, narratives of marginalized groups have to penetrate our classes. We need to have a sociology of emergence, like Sousa Santos says. So it has been a pleasure being here, seeing everybody, miss everybody. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you all. Thank you very much, Dan, for GEELLE. I am always learning with these beautiful talks. Thank you, SOUZANA. Thank you, NDIMANDE. You brought so many important issues for education, like visual literacy, epistemological disobedience. It was a pleasure indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Guys, so before I say goodbye, let me just show you the next event. And just one quick second. People ask me, Daniel, can I use this in my classes to teach English? You know, you saw it was very nice to to listen to Dimande's English, to Susana's, of course you can. You can use in your research, okay? Of course, it's a pleasure. So let me just finish with the, let me pay justice to, is it projecting, Michele? Yes? Yeah. Let me pay justice to our last event, anti-racist language education and teacher education. It's on YouTube too. Yes, this was our last event. And the next one will be about translation. It will be amazing, guys. It's next week, next Friday, 3:30 Brazil time. It will be in Portuguese, okay? Tradução e formação docente em diálogo, 3:30, with professors Erika Lima from Unicamp, Lenita Esteves from the University of São Paulo, and Silvana Aguiar dos Santos from the Federal University of Santa Catarina. And we shall discuss the importance of translation studies in our field, and I think it's going to be amazing. Guys, big kiss, big hug. Dimande, we wait for you in Brazil for the churrasco, okay? It's a deal. And thank you very much. Stay safe. Thank you very much, guys. Obrigado. Goodbye. Thank you.